为避免耽误您的时间，本期主要内容是揭露并分析精神科检查中的脑涨落骗局，这是一个毫无理论依据却苟活于体系中的伪科学项目。如果哪天医生开口让您做这个项目，请务必清楚，这是不靠谱的，您有权拒绝，也能直接换一家医院。In the previous episode, we unpacked the origins of EFG and its so-called principles. In this one, we continue to trace how it actually operates in practice. A few days later, I received feedback from the local health authority, and it was almost laughable. The staff handling the case didn't even know what EFG was. They simply repeated that the hospital had the 3 certificates, therefore it was compliant.
继承未见尾。
好，那请问您的调查结果是怎么样的呢？
然后他们把这个相关的资质都给我们发过来了。
然后呢？
所以说他这个资质是合法的、合规的。
The hospital director contacted me again, and he himself seemed rather confused. Ironically, he ended up teaching me how to look up medical device registrations. When I checked the insurance catalog myself, I found EFG openly listed. To my surprise and dismay, this device had been officially approved, even included under national health insurance. What's more, an EFG test in China isn't cheap. It typically costs anywhere from about 400 CNY to over 1,000 per session. So this is clearly not just a hospital-level issue. It has been legitimized, top to bottom. The final clue I was left with was the device approval. I then turned to the medical device side of the story. On the Drug Administration's official website, we found 3 models of EFG machines currently approved, all of them classified as Class 3 devices, which is the highest threshold of review. I also consulted a senior contact in the medical equipment industry. She clearly knew more about EFG, but spoke in very vague terms. She only stressed that the industry is full of contradictions, that this kind of product helps keep the system running, and repeated the wording from the approval notes. This test can only be used as an auxiliary tool, not as a basis for diagnosis or treatment. In reality, this is a Gray's own project that has long existed within the medical industry chain, and EFG is unlikely to be the only one. When searching for papers, I discovered that in international, authoritative databases, there is absolutely nothing on EFG. Just as unfortunate, I couldn't even find any formal papers debunking it. In China, the only publications I could track down were from 1990. For example, one paper titled DT and the Holographic Correlation of Human Brain Fluctuation TAGI Maps. Let me pull out a particularly painful passage. Right at the beginning, it boasts of 25.08 million repeated experimental data points over 2 years. Claims to use a double-blind method or even a triple-blind method, but only reports p-values with no further statistical details. And then the next part gets even more absurd. 咱们来随便找一段念一下啊。人的大脑掌握太极图是整体全息的，人体也是整体全息的，即1生2， 2生3， 3生万物，万物归一。
不要。
理论根据是无极到有极，太极是阴阳，阴阳是四象，四象生八卦，八卦是四卦，抽象。这就是90年代的抽象文案吗？有点太超前了。This reads more like a piece of mysticism than science. In recent years, I could only find 2 papers, one of them tied to traditional Chinese medicine. The other built its entire argument on the assumption that EFG can detect neurotransmitter levels. But this is the fatal flaw of the whole field. To this day, there is no scientific evidence or peer-reviewed paper proving that EFG or brainwaves can directly reflect neurotransmitter concentrations. Once that premise collapses, all the subsequent group comparisons, t-tests, and p-values become meaningless. They claim EFG can quantitatively detect the power values of GABA, DA, 5-HT, and E, but these are nothing more than software-generated numbers, so-called power values, never validated against established methods like cerebrospinal fluid analysis. In short, it's a black box metric. Looking further into its principles, we found that EFG is essentially EEG with a new label, the same machine wrapped in a different story, with no basis for its interpretation. For context, EEG stands for electroencephalogram. Electro means electric, encephalo means brain, and gram means record or chart. EEG is a Class 2 medical device, compliant, safe, and widely used as an auxiliary diagnostic tool in epilepsy, sleep disorders, brain injury, and coma monitoring, with decades of accumulated research. It can capture abnormal discharges, which means EEG is useful not only for ruling out organic lesions, but also for detecting functional abnormalities. However, psychiatric disorders have no specific EEG signatures, so EEG cannot be used as a diagnostic tool for them. EEG records the combined electrical activity of thousands of cortical neurons. 神经递质是由神经元合成并储存在突触囊泡里的化学物质，释放后作用于突触后受体，导致突触后神经元的电位或代谢活动，形成各种极为复杂的电活动。一个神经元可以释放多种递质，每种递质也有不同类型的受体，信号在树突上汇合，形成的电活动极其复杂且难以估计。因此，要把某一种神经递质的变化直接对应到某一类脑电波形，在现阶段是几乎不可能的。In the official registration documents for EFG, the stated function is only auxiliary diagnosis of depression. There is no mention at all of its supposed ability to detect neurotransmitter levels. My guess is that it slipped through approval precisely because of this vague wording, compared with the detailed and explicit functional descriptions required of legitimate medical devices. EFG's documentation looks ambiguous at best and full of holes. For people with mental illness, what they truly need is understanding and reliable care, not spending money on a placebo dressed up as an EFG test, and certainly not a scam endorsed by health insurance. When pseudoscience disguises itself as medicine, it doesn't just drain wallets. It erodes the trust of patients and families in the entire healthcare system. My hope is that this video at least makes one thing clear. If you are ever offered an EFG test, you have the right to say no. Medicine requires more than machines and metrics. It requires respect for real science and respect for every patient.